Hi, welcome to the 22nd Nantucket Film Festival. I'm Miss Stell Brabe. I'm the executive director of the festival. Thank you. Welcome to In Their Shoes with Chris Matthews, a longtime board member and friend, and host of In Their Shoes with us for 9 years. 9 years. Today, he is joined by Oscar-winning writer, our screenwriter tributee, Tom McCarthy, and actor Bobby Cannavale, who starred in two of Tom McCarthy films, Win-Win and The Station Agent. Without further ado, please give them a warm welcome.
Great. This is so great.
Thank you.
So here we are, three Catholics to talk about a great movie that tears the hell out of the Catholic Church to start with. I want to get to that. I also want to get to everything you've been doing. I want to bring in Bobby, because Bobby and you have shared the two movies that I want to talk about. And I'm fascinated by your decision to go after the cardinal law and take on that, take on journalism as your hero, which I love. The gutsy journalists that are in your movie, like Robbie Robinson and the rest, and Marty Barron. I know these guys. It's an amazing story of what journalism can do for the country and how cover-up ultimately doesn't work. Hopefully. That's what we always hope. And sometimes cover-up isn't worse than the crime. Sometimes the crime's worse than the cover-up, but we'll talk about that. These guys, they're both actors. This fellow to my left, Tom McCarthy, went to BC. Is that a problem? Anybody? I went to Holy Cross, so it has been a problem in the past. And Bobby's a New Jersey guy. Both are Jersey guys, which is great, because that's a character in itself. I want to ask you about, first of all, I want to talk about, I've noticed by screening all your movies the last couple of nights, because they're all on demand now, which is great. It's all free, pretty much. You can watch. By the way, these movies are great if you have demand. They are great. Station Agent, which I believe I saw when it came out. I love that movie. Let's talk about that. And with Peter Dinklage, who's going on because you boosted this guy. I mean, he's a major now, and so's he. So you're like the starter for these guys. And I noticed in that, and also I noticed in Win-Win, which I love with Paul Giamatti, because I love everything he's in. It's about people working together. It's not about the life we live on this planet right now, because of Trump and other things. It's not about everybody fighting with each other, ethnically or whatever the fight is. It's about people working together. And it was so magical to watch Station Agent, about three lonely people coming together with real problems. One person I thought was actually suicidal. And somehow their company saves them and makes them happy. It's great stuff you write. And you're one of the guys that make it happy. I get very emotional about this stuff. I mean, I live in the movies. You're on.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here, first of all. We don't know why you're not on the beach, but we're happy you're here. And certainly thank you to Chris Matthews for hosting this incredible event. It's an honor to be a guest of the Nantucket Film Festival and to be here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What was the question?
About ensemble, about putting, because you really, I know they give awards now for ensemble performance.
Right.
But your movies are, at least the three I mentioned, as ensembles, where people work together and need each other. The company, just the sheer company. That ending scene of Station Agent, when they're just sitting together on the porch drinking beer, and you go, they're happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Look.
Bad question?
Bad question. Bad start. No.
You use a lot of New York actors. Why do you do that?
You tapped into something that I think is bigger for me, which is, when things are really hard for me, I've noticed this in the last year, maybe in the last, 3 to 6 months. When things get difficult for me on a global or national level, I retreat to movie theaters. Like, it's where I go to kind of feel, not only to see movies and to be inspired, but to be around like-minded people who, by like-minded I mean love movies and are open-minded and open-hearted. And so for me, it's always been a place, as is the theater, for community. So I think I've always been a little bit drawn to that aspect of the form. to begin with. So, but with Station Agent specifically, it was my first film, and it was coming at a point in my life. I just gotten out of grad school. I went to the Yale Drama School as a young actor. I came out of the drama school like a lot of young actors, like after spending 3 years in a conservatory, like raring to go, surrounded by community and colleagues and friends and mentors, and completely inspired, and like hit that like Dead Sea, where like nobody called and I had nothing to do for like months and months and months, and you can only work out so much as a young actor, and I just started feeling. Did I go down? I'm up. I think I was always been writing at that point, and I sort of lost myself in what became the Station Agent. I started thinking about that theme about loneliness, community, what it means, how it can lift us, how some characters really need and thrive on it, like Bobby's character in that film, how some characters work very hard to avoid it, like Pete's character in that film. And that was sort of the genesis of that film, I think, in many ways.
Bobby, I thought you gave that film life when you showed up in that ridiculous hot dog wagon in the middle of nowhere. And what was that a joke to start with? That you were going to have a hot dog wagon where they said Newfoundland, nobody's there. So you go with your hot dog wagon to sell cafe leche, and there's nobody there but this dwarf.
Yeah.
That's the only person there.
Yeah. Well, remember it wasn't really his, he lived in the city, this guy, and he was coming in because his dad was sick, and it was his dad's truck, and I think that it was probably a spot that had been there for a while. It was his dad's truck, and so I think it was a destination truck, if you will. And it was just one of those things, I guess, where circumstances had him there, and I don't think he really wanted to be there, and then all that needed to happen was for somebody else to show up, and it just so happened to be Pete's character, we worked on that for a really long time before we actually got to make that movie, and so we got to spend a lot of time together, Pete and Tom and Patty and I, and so nobody really wanted to make that movie, right? I mean, nobody wanted to make that movie. At least they didn't want to make it with us.
A lot of people still don't want to make that movie.
Yeah.
Did you know Peter Dinklage before that? He's the short guy.
Yeah.
I met Pete. I had just come down from, like I said, out of the drama school, and I had co-written a play with a friend at the drama school about P.T. Barnum and his relationship with Tom Thumb. And I'd arrived in New York, and I said, I need a smaller actor to play Tom Thumb.
Four or five.
And everyone was like, find Dink. And I'm like, who is this Dink guy? And I went and saw him, and he was actually in a play by a writer named Patrick Breen at the time, and I saw him in it, and I got to remember the name of that play, and he was great, and so I met Pete as a result of that. I cast him in this play, we started working together, and I had him in mind since then.
I was surprised that he played. He's the guy in Game of Thrones, and he.
I think everybody in the world knows Pete Dinklage now.
Everybody in the world? This is so good an audience. I thought that. I thought he said something. I was digging up on what he said recently. He said, one thing that's lost in screenwriting is that the single writer. He says, there's too many chefs now. He said, it used to be, he was talking about back in the 40s with Bogart, and he said, you had like one, well, actually, there was two brothers, actually, the two brothers, Epstein brothers wrote that, but that was not a good example. But he said, it used to be like you. He said, it's better to have one writer than have a bunch of production, a lot of actors hired, a lot of money, and then, let's come up with a story. He said, that's the problem today.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm a fan of all forms, right? For me, it works better that way. I also think there's obviously some great writing teams over the years. Some of them have been honored here. But ultimately, it becomes a sort of, you need a singular vision. For me, what works best also is really working with actors closely. I mean, specifically, like Bobby said, we had a lot of time for the script to sort of mature over time and evolve. And I really got to write knowing them all. I was just talking with my wife about this recently. I remember vividly handing Peter the script for the first time. And having been very good friends with him at that point, I was terrified because I'm not a dwarf. I don't know what that experience is like, and it's very personal. And it would be the same as if I gave the movie to a 70-year-old African-American woman and said, here, I wrote a movie for you. I have no idea what your life experience is like. Although Pete was closer to me in a lot of ways, and age certainly, and we were colleagues, I still didn't understand his experience. So I just remember giving it to him and walking away and being just terrified, thinking, God, I hope I didn't offend, or I hope it works, you know? And over time, we all developed it, with Bobby, with Patty, and...
But you didn't have that problem with me.
No. I did not have that problem with you.
What I liked about that movie a lot is that everybody sort of learned each other.
Yeah.
And they paid attention. They weren't like people running past each other in the subway. They were like, hey, let's stop, take some time and get to know this guy and what he's worried about. I mean, when he stood on that bar stool, he was shit-faced that night. He'd been drinking serious liquor for I saw 5 or 6 shots at him. And he finally is tired of people looking at him, tired of having people look at him because he's short. And he stands up on the bar stool and he does this, look at me, here I am, take it or leave it. Was that something that he came up with, or you came up with that?
That was in the script.
Yeah.
We stuck to the script. I think scenes like that we definitely play with a little bit. I think Bobby's probably the person I gave the most liberty because we were just kind of in sync, I think, at that point, and I trusted his humor. And Pete was just character-wise, he was so almost monosyllabic through most of the movie that I really kind of kept him on a tight leash.
That's a short script, it seems, that movie.
Yeah.
There's very little words in it.
Yeah,
few words.
it's pretty spare. I mean, for me, the real inspiration for that movie was the depot. My brother owns a house out there, a second home actually, a little lake house, little lake cottage, and I was driving by in that depot and I thought, wow, that is fascinating.
Where is it in Jersey?
It's in a small town called Newfoundland,
up north?
out towards the Delaware Water Gap.
Oh, North, I know where that is.
Yeah.
Columbia. Okay.
Yeah, right, exactly. And
That's where a former congressman named Neil Gallagher, they found a body in his basement once. Little problem there, and he's hiding. He's up there now. He's a good guy, actually. He's up there now.
Okay, the problem is now my story sounds stupid.
It's another story.
Because your story has a body in the basement. I got a depot.
He's a good Irish guy.
I think we should move on to Win-Win.
Let me ask you about Bobby, because I think your character, one movie, I really recommend you see these movies again if you haven't seen them lately. And the other movie was Win-Win, which I love with Giamatti. And here's a guy, he's a lawyer. It's not quite clear, but his business, I mean, this is like a small-town lawyer, not a Wall Streeter, whose gradually the business is dying. And sometimes that happens. And it's not quite clear why it's dying, but it's dying. And he's got to do this stupid thing, the shenanigan with putting this guy in a home and getting the agency fee for it. And I thought that your guy comes along, and I think, once again, it's a team. And the great thing is that you got this guy, Jeffrey Tambor, who's become a big guy, too, now, Jeffrey Tambor, who's so dour. Yeah. He's so down. He's like the glass half empty, and you're the glass is full all the time. And you just razz this guy and compete with him. And my favorite line was, when you show up in a family crisis and he doesn't show up, and you're competing with this guy.
Notice who's not here.
Yeah. You notice who's not here?
Yeah.
I thought it was the characters in that are win-win. It's about wrestling.
Yeah. I think it's also about people who are missing things in their life. And I think, the character is very up, the character I play, but he's also going through a terrible divorce, and he's miserable, and he says to him, this kid is helping me right now. He kind of, they all sort of use that kid for what they need in their life.
He's the wrestling star, yeah.
This is this kid, this wrestling star, and he's very clear about it when he says, I need this kid right now. And I think that there's something about friends that grew up together. I think the Giamatti character and my character, they grew up together, and there's sort of honesty with each other and what they need from each other. I find that Tom sort of has a real good beat on that. Men who know how to ask each other for things emotionally. And I think that happens in The Station Agent. I think it happens in Win-Win. And I don't think we see that a lot in films.
And not in life.
Male friendship like that.
Yeah, when I was in the Peace Corps, we'd be stuck out in Africa, middle of nowhere. We started to develop these kind of relationships.
Yeah.
You actually knew each other. You play some horrifically frightening characters in the movies now.
That's a left turn.
I mean, did I ever see him in the scene with the 3-in-1 oil in Boardwalk Empire? How did that scare you? I mean, all the guy did was make an impulsively sarcastic response. In the split second, he got himself killed because this psycho here didn't like the disrespect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's competitive business he was in, and so I suppose, that guy boy, when I went in to meet for that character, they didn't have anything written down, and it was literally Terry Winter and Martin Scorsese just pitching that character to me, and I didn't have to read anything. They were so excited. So when you meet with writers who are so excited about a character that they're writing, you just say yes. And so I didn't read anything until like a couple of weeks or a few weeks before we started shooting that, and that character was just sort of foot on the gas the whole time. I don't think I was ever standing around in a scene that whole season. I guess stakes were high, and this guy was a territorial guy who needed to do what he had to do, and I killed a lot of people that year, and it was all creative, very creative ways. Shovel to the head, a pipe to the back of the head, garroting, gasoline, lighting them on fire. Yeah, that was
You
fun.
said something, and I on an upper note here, you said something about acting, which I think you know about too, and something Jack Lemmon said years ago, which is when you go on, you get your chance. When the lights go on and it's your shot, whatever the movie, it's magic time. And you got to act. I said that on TV. If you don't like being here, don't be here. If you think this is the most important thing in your life, don't show up. Everybody's 2 million people watching. You better have something worth saying. And you said that about you got to act like in every scene this is the most important part of your life.
Oh yeah, that's what I think. Somebody told me that a long time ago, that if they've written something, they haven't written something that's about an ordinary day. It's the most important day of your life. And so that's the way I always approach it, that today, something happens today that's going to change the entire course of my life. And so I tend to play things, I tend to think of things that way. Or else what was the point of it being written for everybody to see?
So even when you're playing the bad guy, it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that guy is desperate. That guy's desperate, and I think he's a survivor in his world. I mean, certainly in that world he is. I mean, you're talking about a world in which he's literally competing with Al Capone. And so, I think there's opportunity for him at every turn. And opportunity is something that's active, that you can play. Otherwise, you're just sort of blending in with the wallpaper.
I want to come back and talk to you about playing Stanley Kowalski's character in Blue Jasmine, which everybody saw, right? Wasn't he unbelievable in Julie that? You ended up being a more powerful character than the la-di-da Kate Blanchett. You come off as more real. Let me go back to you.
If you ask Woody about that, though, if you ask Woody about anything to do with that Stanley Kowalski, he literally goes, "I don't know what you're talking about."
I know.
Then we talked to him about it, and he would say, "I don't know what you're talking about."
No rights. He doesn't want to pay the rights.
Yeah, he doesn't want to pay rights. Yeah.
Let me talk to you about the reason why everybody wanted you here, Tom. Because a lot of people here from New England, a lot of them have Catholic backgrounds, not everybody, of course, and they are very troubled by what happened with the Catholic Church, what Cardinal Law got away with, how they protected him, sent him off to Rome in a nice world over there, and how so many reasonably good people, or at least morally neutral people, got involved in the cover-up. And what stunned me, like all of us, is 90 priests in the Archdiocese of Boston were involved with doing something to young boys they shouldn't have been doing. And tell me how you got into it and why you thought it was important enough to spend so much effort into making that one of the great movies of modern times, I think.
Well, thank you. That project, I was approached by two producers, two of the four producers on it, Nicole Rockland and Bly Faust, who had secured the life rights to the film. And I was approached at a time, I might have been editing Win-Win, but I was approached at a time where I was in the middle of a process on something, and I couldn't really wrap my head around the story. So the first time it came to me, I said no. I said, this is a great story. It's fascinating. I connect with it. I think they knew I would. They knew my background. They knew I was a McCarthy. They knew there'd be some, connection to the material. And then about a year later, I had kind of finished everything and had some downtime. And I said to my agent, what happened to that? And she reached out and we started talking again. And they had tried to work with other writers. It wasn't working. They came back to me. Look, on some level, I was just incredibly, like all of us, compelled by the story, right? If you can remove even the emotion from it, if that's possible, it's just such a compelling story. And secondly, I felt like, having gone to Boston College, having been raised in an Irish Catholic family, having understood that community, having spent a lot of time in New England and in Boston, that I was maybe in some ways best seated to tell this story. And look, unlike any other project I've ever worked on professionally, before I even said yes, I drove out to New Jersey where my folks lived at the time, and I sat them down in the local diner, Old Glory, good diner, and I said, and I told them I was going to direct that movie. I said, I'm going to come on and write and direct this movie, and as soon as I announce, you'll read and hear about it from your friends, especially your friends in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island, where a lot of their friends and family are from, and we had a long discussion. And I wanted them to know, my father, and they're both quite Catholic, and my father said at the time, he just wanted to know my reasons for wanting to take on the story. And he wanted to know what sort of my point of view. And to be honest, at that point, I hadn't had a fully formed point of view because it was still early. But I did assure him that I would approach the story with hopefully as much grace and integrity as I thought the reporters did and the editors that worked on that story, because I think they are, in fact, the true heroes in many ways. But what happened in that moment, Chris, which was really interesting, is my parents started talking about it in that moment. And my mother, who's usually pretty reserved with her opinions on things like this, they really started having a long and quite heated and even emotional conversation about how they felt about it. And I was sitting there thinking, oh man, they haven't had this discussion. They haven't talked about this. And who wants to talk about this? Who wants to talk about, forget the scandal, forget the accusations, forget what institution is right or wrong, but who wants to sit around and talk about children being sexually molested and abused by anyone, not to mention priests? Nobody wants to talk about that. Why do you even want to think about it? And in that moment I thought, oh, this is the reason to tell the story, to get people talking about it, to raise awareness, because it's still obviously an issue. And so I think that moment I really thought, okay, I kind of see my path on this and I see how I'm going to approach it.
Yeah, I think it's so different than Doubt, because Doubt's a play really about guilt or innocence, and this is more about truth and just getting to try to find it. I love the fact that Rachel McAdams' character, who's a reporter, a really good young reporter, wants to be a great reporter. That's her mission, it's clear. Ruffalo is very emotional about this. She just wants to be a great reporter, it seems. And she said to one of the people involved in it, stop saying molest. Give me a word that you can write in the paper that explains what went on here. And I always wondered about that word. It's too mild-mannered. It never explained the raping that was going on, the real sexual invasion of these kids when they're prepubescent and have no idea what's going on, except God is telling them to do this in the form of this priest who they look up to. And anyway, I thought that was a great part about it. And I also think that you don't paint the church, the BC big shots. These are the guys who show up on all the, I'm not going to knock it, but they're always on the boards. Yep. And they're always the big shots who make a lot of money in law or something, and they're always the ones that hang around the priests and take care of the bishops. They tend to be Republican. And just not really kidding either. And they're the kind of, that great Boston accent. I mean, one of those guys, the shorter guy that comes out, and his wrist to Mr. BC alumni.
Paul Guilfoyle, who went to BC High.
Well, he's got the accent. He's Tommy Tip's son's exact accent. Yeah. He has the exact manner of one of these burghers, one of these important people in town. You've got that character so right, big shot Catholics.
Yeah, I think, Paul is, as soon as I found out Paul went to BC High and was from there, and Paul, he's the guy with the toast. You said earlier, for Boston. Yeah. He's like, let's say for Boston, like that. He came with so many things.
He tried to cover up.
He was great. I want to go back to one thing you said, which I thought was really important, which is the ensemble nature, how you started this whole conversation, and what that team brought, the Spotlight team. And specifically, you mentioned Rachel McAdams, she played Sasha Pfeiffer. At that point, I think Sasha was maybe 29 when she joined the Spotlight team. She was the only woman on the team, and she was by far the youngest. And she was the one that demanded that language. She would say, I want to know, and I won't get into it because of the crowd here tonight, but she, when we were talking to her, Josh Singer, my co-writer, and I the first time, she would use this language with us. And it stops you, right, when people start talking about it in really graphic terms. And she demanded that. And she demanded of the men in the room that she was working with. And I always thought that was really interesting, right? You never know who's going to bring what to a team. And she was just like, guys, this has got to be more specific. It's too easy to say molest. It's easy to move over that word. It just is. You're like, oh, yeah, molest. Oh, that's a bad thing. But if you thought, oh no, what really happened? Okay, so a boy's next to him and he what? And then he did what? And then you're like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah. I thought the way you handled the orientation stuff was really sensitive too. Yeah. These guys, well, some of them were gay, but some of them weren't. And some of them were, the behavior was out of control. And I thought it was the way you handled that kid who had been molested by the priest, who was gay. And one of them said, how do they know? The fact that somebody could be preyed upon and feel, even though you're a victim, like you somehow feel guilty. One of the characters said that.
Yeah. Well, look, priests are not predators or predators, and they're very good at what they do. They're very good at identifying, alienating, and then ultimately moving in on. So there were all different sexual orientations that were preyed upon. Joe Crowley, who just passed away about 3 months ago, who was represented in the movie, who is the man you're talking about.
The one walking through the park with Rachel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a powerful scene.
Yeah, and Joe finally lost his battle with the demons, and just life caught up to him. But I was thrilled that he was around to see the movie come out and be so well received, and a really special, wonderful man who sat with us early on as one of the first victims to sit with us and just tell us his story. And he was so full of life, so a real loss there. Another
sensitivity was the ethnic thing with Marty Baron, who's Jewish, and I thought it was great the way, because the Irish are like this. I know all the nuances of the prejudices. And I thought it was fascinating that he was an out-of-towner. They said, he's an out-of-towner. That was the phrase used. Not Jewish, he's an out-of-towner. Yeah. He doesn't understand. He's not one of us. The whole thing. It's all carefully wrapped up. And yet he comes off as the real hero because he hardly speaks, 20 words in the whole movie? Yeah. And he's really like that. Liev Schreiber's got this guy. Marty Baron's now the executive editor of the Washington Post. Yeah. But the motivation of the guy was, we got a story here. We're here, and we're serious journalists, and this is something that should be covered. It was so professional.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the other reason I was drawn to the story. Just that, you talk sometimes about films, depending on the film, and sometimes they're just barstool stories, I would refer to them. Like something I could turn to a guy next to me and be like, here's what I got. And you have a paper who had never had an editor from the outside. You're right. Marty would say a lot of cities call them newcomers. In Boston, you're called an outsider. Yeah. And he also said something very interesting about Boston. He said it's one of the few seaside towns that looks in, not out.
Did you know it was called the Hub?
Yeah,
Way
exactly.
back before the Revolutionary War, that Hub of the Universe thing?
Of course.
The mentality of looking in, it was real back then.
Yeah, but I mean, what's fascinating about Marty is here comes this outsider into this paper where they had been reporting. Eileen McNamara had wrote this beautiful story. She'd been covering it. She's one of the great Globe reporters and was covering this. And at the end of the article, and I won't do it justice, but she said, we may never know what those papers are, the church documents. We may never know what's in them. And Marty read that before his first day on the job and said, what does this mean? We may never know. And they're like, well, we can't get them, right? The church's holding on. He said, well, why don't we sue for them? And it was such a simple question, really. It was like, well, let's go after them. And because everyone at that point had been at the paper for so long, they become so used to sort of the power and pressure of the church that they didn't push deeper. And it was that one simple question that led to this whole thing. It really had obviously a global impact. So
we're going to take questions here very soon when they come up. I want to go to the big scene. Movies have big scenes. And I thought the big scene in your film was Jim Sullivan, when the guy you were wrestling with, the top lawyer who was helping to cover it up in a very civilized way, not a bad guy, the big, strong-looking Irish guy. And he goes, and you get him finally to leave his wife, and you get him to go out into the cold. The other thing about Boston, it's always cold in these movies, like The Verdict. It's always gray and cold, and it's February, always in Boston. And you get him to come out of his house. He's a very comfortable upper-middle-class guy in a nice house. And you get him to leave where he's comfortable, come outside with his jobber on, and you get him to do the great thing. That great moment when he circles the names of all the priests and said, you've got them right, every single one of them. Did you imagine that scene, or did it happen?
A version of that happened, and we had to figure out a way to dramatize it. We also had to protect the identity of that character because he was never actually revealed, and there was legal consequence. So
he never was revealed in the reporting?
Not in the name, no.
Yeah.
And we had to be very careful, had to be vetted, because it was Robbie's source, and he was still protecting it. And we did do it with a few sources in that film. Paul Guilfoyle's character, too.
Did you know that was the big scene?
Yeah.
It was to me.
I certainly thought it was a major scene. I would think thematically, maybe the other big scene for me thematically, in terms of a penultimate scene, was Keaton's admission that he had buried the story, knowingly or unknowingly. Because that to me spoke to complicity, even on the part of the Globe. And that, I thought, was ultimately maybe the most important theme, institutional complicity in these types of crimes. Otherwise, these crimes do not exist.
It's so subtle. Everybody see the movie? Yeah, it's a powerful movie. Well, let's talk about your friend Woody for a minute, okay? Is Woody like Woody, or is he not like Woody? Is he play the character in real life, or is he different than in real life? Is he Woody Allen?
Woody's actually here. Woody, come on out. No,
I mean, I think every other one of his movies is great. I think he bats about 500, maybe 330. Every two or every three of his movies is great.
Yeah.
And then the other ones are like, they're okay.
Yeah, and when you're in it, you don't know if you're in one of the good ones or not.
Well, you were in one.
You're just hoping. But he is. He doesn't talk a lot. People are terrified of him, so people don't talk to him. So I was like, I'm talking to this guy. I was like the only guy on the set. I was working with those girls all the time, and one's Australian, the other one's British. They're both doing accents. They're playing sisters. So they had a lot going on, and they were terrified of him, and nobody wants to talk to him. Usually the script supervisor is right next to the director, and they talk to him a lot. And this script supervisor, he never talked to her. He would just sit there, and he would he was always looking at like videos on his phone. So I just decided I'm going to put my chair next to his. Day one, I put my chair next to his, and I said, I'm going to sit next to you. And he went, all right. And he didn't really pay much attention to me. And then I would just keep asking him questions. What are you looking at? And he said, well, it's magic. I look at magic. And I said, what do you mean? And he looks at magic tricks. I said, oh. So I found out that he loves magic. And then he did some coin tricks for me. And we talked about the Knicks. But really, I'm the only person he talked to because I was the only one who would talk to him. And then he's got like weird little things, like we finish at 6 o'clock no matter what. So he'll be in the middle of a scene, and if we're not done with the scene, we're just done. He'll just leave. Like he left Cate Blanchett in the shower. That scene at the end, he left in the middle of the take because he's got a dinner reservation, and he just left. And somebody different called cut, that called action. So that's strange. And then, yeah. I used to like to touch him because he doesn't like to be touched, So I would sit next to him and I used to go like, hey, Woody, let me ask you something. And he would look at his arm. And he would kind of chuckle at me. He liked me. And then I know he liked me because then when the movie was over, he would, he comes to all my plays. I do a lot of theater in New York, and he comes to every one of them. And he comes really early, and he sits in the front row. He came to see Glenn Ross, and he sat in the front row at the first preview. And then he invited me to come see him play with his band. So I know he likes me, even though he acted like, he didn't like to be touched, but he kind of liked it, I think.
God. So I thought your character really grew in that movie. I mean,
yeah.
You get to be the star in a way. You're the strong person who knows who he is. She has no idea who she is. She's living in this sort of la-di-da gone world.
Yeah.
She's married to Madoff.
Yeah.
She doesn't know what she's doing. Bernie Madoff made her. She's living through illusion her whole life, delusion. Yeah. And you know who you are.
Yeah.
And you're a good guy.
Yeah. Well, for me, the whole thing was about his relationship with Ginger. It is like Streetcar. I've always wanted to do that play. I haven't gotten the chance to do it yet, and I read the thing and I thought, well, it is a lot like Streetcar. I mean, he's in love with her. He's so crazy about her, and then into their world walks this threat, and it throws everything off for him.
Yeah.
And so I just focused on that relationship and trying to protect that relationship at all costs.
Yeah.
It worked out. I remember we had to reshoot one scene. They had said to me, I shot that while I was doing Boardwalk, and I almost didn't get a chance to do it because I was in the middle of shooting Boardwalk, and it was really hard to get out of. And when it was all said and done, it was just about asking those guys, it's Woody Allen, please let me out. And Woody shot me. I shot like 12 straight days in San Francisco. I shot the whole thing in order, which never happens. So I was in and out, and I was supposed to have one day off that then changed because he decided he wanted to reshoot the scene. And I remember I showed up, and it was the scene where we pick her up and we're going into the house, and she and I have this confrontation before we get into the house. And we didn't know why we were there. It was a Saturday, and Kate had no idea. We were in the makeup trailer, and she says, "Do you know why we were shooting this?" I said, "You're the star of the movie. I don't know." And so because he doesn't talk to anybody. And so finally we're there, and everything's all set up, and we still haven't seen Woody. And then he doesn't say hello, you know. He just says, you know, "Okay, what I want you to do now is you walk up to here." And she says, "Woody, why are we reshooting this scene?" And he said, "Because I didn't like either of your performances." And I went, "All right, got it." And I walked away. And she wanted to keep talking, and he didn't like that, you know. So then I don't know what they talked about, but I was just better. And then when it was over, I said, "What didn't you like?" And he said, "I don't like." He goes, "You know, I just saw it, and it feels like you're doing something that makes me think that you're going to end up with her." So he didn't really like. It's really funny because he doesn't. It's just a different way of directing. It's like he tells you that there's a result that he doesn't like, and he just wants you to fix it. But he doesn't really tell you what to play. He doesn't, you know, all directors are different. You just have to sort of adjust.
What does he do?
You know, he doesn't like a lot of questions. He just wants you to do the job. I mean, I think everybody knows this at this point. You know, like, you know, there's that great documentary about him. You know, that American Masters, in which, you know, all the actors say that, you know, he doesn't like a lot of questions. He wants you to come prepared and know what you're doing and surprise him if you can. But he just doesn't like a lot of questions.
He was spectacular the other night in the AFI tribute to Diane Keaton. He was spectacular. His whole shtick was just really funny and, you know, respectful of her. And he said when she was going out with him 100 years ago, he said, "I'd like you to have thought you were going out with a young, promising director." And he said she told everybody she was going out with a stepping stone. Which is, I know about in my business too. It goes on. Well, you know, the thing about movies, and the reason people my age like movies is because they're cathartic and something really happens in a movie. And, you know, the movies I like are taut dramas. I think I like what everybody likes. You know, I like History of Violence. I love that movie, Viggo Mortensen's. I loved Someone to Watch Over Me, Ridley Scott. I love movies that are serious. There's love in them. There's some violence and real love and passion. I love The Verdict, which is sort of a preview of your movie in the sense of taking on the church. And God, I think of all the movies like that, they all fit the same pattern. There's a challenge facing somebody. They take on this challenge, and there's something wonderful about it, whether it's Newman or it's Harrison Ford and the Witness. Witness was a hell of a movie too. Movie. And why don't we see more of those movies? Taut dramas like yours.
Well,
we get movies with big Godzillas in them, with big stupid robots, and the joke in your business now is who's the robot? Even Noah, which was not a great movie with Russell Crowe, who's great, they had a robot in it. There's no robot in the story of Noah. Yeah, there's some big thing comes out of the rocks and it becomes the villain. I go, why they need that? I know you know this business.
Robots are cool. I mean, right? No, I think look, it's getting harder and harder to make the type of movies you just named, right? I mean, and for a lot of reasons, it's part studio driven, it's part audience driven. It's what people want. And yes, Spotlight was dead on the table 3 times before we got it made. I was convinced we weren't making that movie at one point. I was like, it's gone, shoot. And at that, and it just really, and that was a tricky movie because it was ensemble driven, because of the subject matter. But like people really wanted to make the movie, but it's getting more and more difficult to have a path to make those films. So the best thing we can do is support them and continue to push and champion them. But you know, there's a lot of good people in the studio system out there, smart people like us who really love movies. You meet them. They're not all like the bad studio executives. They mostly get into it because they love films. But the environment environment has just shifted so much. But things change, right? I mean, what's happening now with Netflix and Amazon and people
series.
running these, and they're putting money back into movies and TV and series, and it's exciting. There's more being generated, so I think we'll see a little bit of a resurgence, hopefully.
Yeah, Night Manager, Big Little Lies.
Yep.
Everybody see these?
It's good shows.
They're fantastic. They're fantastic. Anyway, do we have questions? Do we have questions now from everybody? Or we just do it by me? Do I just do it?
I think.
Okay, I can do it. It's easy. Right there. Speak up because you don't have a mic.
I just wanted to say I knew Joseph Crowder for many years. And from his point of view, he was the victim that was very expressive. He was cathartic for him. It was such a great experience because he was so proud of being able to show this movie to a bunch of victims all together. And so I think what has gone unsaid is how important this movie was to the victims. And for one, bringing them together and handling this.
Let's do what's your questions. Yes.
I worked for a long time as an investigative journalist, and one thing that really resonated for me with Spotlight was how you got that job. Right. How did you do it? How did you get us the right?
Well, we spent a lot of time with those journalists. We really did. We spent a lot of time. Josh Singer and I probably went up for about over a year and a half, just kept going back and back and back and back, and also meeting them in other places, just listening to them, talking with them. And then also the actors did. The great thing about working with great actors like Bobby and all the people in that movie, you hire them and they immediately start doing their own work. I remember I called John Slattery to offer him the role, and then called Ben Bradley a few hours later to say, hey, John Slattery's going to play you. And he said, yeah, I know, I already heard from him. Like, Ben's so grumpy, he's already mad at me about it. He's like, yeah, no, it's good casting. He's coming up to have dinner with me. And I thought, geez, I just gave John, I literally just offered the role. So
He should be happy it was Slattery.
Yeah, he was pretty happy about it.
I think so.
But, and those people were very involved in the process. I remember, we had been working on the script, Josh, about a year and a half, and right before pre-production, we went down to the Globe. We sat in the meeting where they actually hold the 10 a.m. meeting, and in that room, and we sat there for about 8 hours with Robinson and Resendez. And then I think Sasha came in for a little bit too, and we just went word by word through the script. And just sort of revetting it, kind of going through it. And I can't say enough also about Marty Baron. For a man who is the busiest man in journalism in many ways, his response and attention to the project was incredible.
The Post is a hell of a lot better paper because of him.
He's a truly
Next,
talented
in the back,
man.
right, sir.
Hi. You made Station Agent your first film, was it 2002, for like $500,000? And you mentioned that it was difficult to make that movie to get it made. If you were starting today for your first feature, given the landscape, how would you go about making your first feature today differently?
How would you go about making it differently?
I mean, not that movie.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I think I know.
Chris Pine.
Chris Pine. A robot.
And Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, probably easier with Dink today. No, great question. And I have a lot of first-time filmmakers approach me about that, and I think every scenario is a little bit different. But it just always starts with a great script. And don't go out until you have a great script. And keep working and working and working on that script until when you're going to hand it to someone, there's just no denying it's a good script. And then you can think about how to package it. Actors, who would write for it? What are the kind of producers that make these films? What are the houses? There's some great houses like A24 and some others that are like taking on these kind of films now, championing them and doing a terrific job with them. So just sort of, just get to know the landscape, and then ultimately, really, I don't know. I think what matters most is coming up with a film that you care about. If you're a filmmaker, I'm assuming you are. You're just asking a question for a weird reason. But I would say, just make a film that you ultimately care about, and just work hard on it.
Next, sir.
Tom, you work with a lot of theater actors. Is that because of the community you're part of, or is it a shooting style?
Both. I think one, I love. Acting is. I recently acted again for the first time in a long time. And my agent said, how was it? Oh my God, it's so easy. They don't do anything. Meaning they have a lot of time on set. But I realized when I got to set, I was thinking, holy shit, this job is hard. Like, and being a director, my admiration and respect for great actors has just improved. And when you see how good they are, what they do, the focus and the attention to it, I have such great respect. It's one of my favorite parts of the process is working with actors. What I love about theater actors is they bring process to it. They're used to rehearsals, they're used to table work, they're used to taking their time. And I speak that language. And so I love involving that. I love having rehearsals for that reason. I love being a part of that process. I'm a big believer in process, which I think was something else Spotlight was all about, process, craft.
Bobby, what kind of director is he?
Oh, just like he said, he's somebody who takes his time and the process. It's fantastic. I've never really had an experience like that before. Most movies you just show up on, and you meet the person you're working with for the first time right before you say the words. And with Tom, it's a long process, and I find by the time that we're shooting, most of the work is done already, and so you're really relaxed, and it's just the best way to work. It's just really well prepared, and he's just somebody who you just feel like really cares about the movie more than most directors.
Wow. Next question, right there, sir.
Tom, Bobby has worked in TV and movies and theater. You're known mostly for movies. Have you thought about TV, and what do you think about directing and writing for TV?
Well, I just did direct in TV recently. I directed the first couple of episodes of 13 Reasons Why, the first 2 episodes of that, and I'm a producer on that. And I had a very good experience with it. I actually did it right after Spotlight, right after the awards season, and primarily because I wanted to go work. You know, one thing they don't tell you about when your movie does that well and you're up for those kind of awards is that you spend a lot of time just talking about yourself and your movie, which after a while gets old. And it's incredibly uncreative. So by the end of that process, I really just wanted to go work. Films, for me, have a longer runway. Like Bobby said, I take my time. I believe in that process. So to have a longer runway. TV right now, to me, feels a little bit like black box theater. And by that, I mean, you know, when I came up through theater, there were sort of the main stage productions, then black box. It's movies, plays where you just go do it. You get a small theater, you don't get hung up on production value, and you just like do great theater, hopefully. And that's what TV feels a little bit like. For as a director, I knew the showrunner, the creator of the show, Brian Yorkie. I knew one of the producers, Steve Golan, on 13 Reasons Why. They approached me. I really liked what the material was about. And I said, let's go do it. So I moved my family right up to Marin right after being in Los Angeles for the Oscars, and we were in rehearsals. You know, it was really great. So, you know, the landscape has changed so much, and there's so many opportunities to kind of go back and forth without the stigma. Bobby's a great example, right? Does great theater, does great movies, does great TV. It's like, it's just where the work is, I think, and it's not so much what type of work you're doing.
Next. Right there.
So I know that you just spoke about 13 Reasons Why and the work that you did on that. So a lot of people have been very in favor of the way that it portrays teen suicide, but a lot of people have also been very upset about it. So what do you think is the importance of tackling these issues, knowing that no matter what, people are going to be so heavily on one side or the other?
Right. Well, look, part of the reason I joined the team of 13 Reasons Why was, in some way, it felt parallel to Spotlight, right? It was dealing with an incredibly sensitive subject, not only teen suicide, but sexual abuse, rape, bullying, all those issues that are so important. And I felt like it did it in a really compelling way. Jay Asher's book that it was based on, 13 Reasons Why, was an incredibly compelling read. I have not read a lot of young adult literature. I read it. I thought, wow, first of all, I was shocked at how intense it was. I just didn't know. I have 2 young daughters. I thought this is important material. These are conversations that have to be had. And, you know, all the sort of, I don't know if controversy is the right word for me, but debate around it, I think that's what it's all about. If people are talking about it, if they're discussing it, agreeing, disagreeing, I feel like I've done my job. And I feel like the team did their job. And I know a lot of thought went into all of these things that they're writing about. So for me, as an artist, I feel like that's our job, to sort of present the conversation. And I'm very proud of the work we did on that show.
What's it like to direct a cartoon? And write a cartoon as
You mean
opposed
Up?
with yeah, he did Up.
Well, I was only the writer in Up. Pete Docter was the brilliant director. Pixar is an incredibly special place. I'm working with another one of their directors, Andrew Stanton, right now in another project. But that is and Pixar is a very different place when I worked there than it is now. It's much bigger. They're working with Disney. But look, that is just a Shangri-La of nerdy creative people who love what they do, and they have a very there's a reason for their success. And I went there right after Station Agent. They saw the Station Agent, invited me to come in and work with Pete writing Up. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I knew their movies and the few movies they'd made at that point, and I was in. But that was an incredibly special place. And part of it is you just feel like when you're there, they can do anything.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And by that, I don't just mean the magical and the epic and the colorful, but I also mean, like, if you look at the first 10 minutes of Up, what we're dealing with is incredibly, most of you, I'm sure, whoever's cried through that first 10 minutes, and I remember writing it and kept turning to Pete, like, you sure we can do this? He's like, yeah, we can do it. And I'm like, okay, you sure? Because it's sort of like now we're dealing with like infertility, and he's like, no, we can do it. And I was like, yeah, but now we're getting to like mental illness and elderly. He's like, no, we can do that. And I was like, this is incredible, and he pulled it off. Suddenly, guys are changing ties and the chair coming down, and it's magical.
So are you. Thank you.
Oh, thank
so
you.
You guys are, and I have to. I just want to say that the range of both of you guys and your talents and what you're developing is amazing. Your talent as an actor, and a scary actor, and a lovable actor, you got it all. And I mean it. And I was sitting at last night. I've been making a point of it's all on demand. Okay, it's all there. You got to go watch The Station Agent again, because the great thing is the way the actors have developed from their careers since then in the early part of this growing century. As awkward as this century is, it is a growing century. And you had guys, all of a sudden, it looked like a walk-on from Mad Men. John Slattery shows up as the bad ex-husband in Station Agent. You go, God, I know that guy. What's he doing here? He's from Mad Men. And this fella here is in all these parts now. And Patricia Clarkson, it's amazing. And she goes on to win the Oscar for best acting by a woman in a major part. And there's so many of these people that you see. And of course, Peter.
Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams, yeah, she plays the what you call her, the hottie in the library.
The hottie in the library with the glasses.
I kept thinking, I know her, but that was her. It was Michelle. She went on to do that Marilyn movie, which was great, and everything else. And I think it's been great the way you've taken these theater actors that would now become part of our lives, household names, and what you've done in terms of creativity, and what you did for the Catholic Church, which is a good kick in the butt. And because I think I knew one of those priests, one of our priests in our parish, Father Hoy, was on that list, which blew our minds, that he was on the list. Anyway, it's an honor to do this job. I love doing this in your shoes, because we've just been in these guys' shoes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.